Monday morning in Kearney began as usual. The city of 85,000 woke up to the sound of trucks delivering goods to stores and the hum of school buses. In the Maple Street neighborhood, where neat two-story houses stood in rows behind white picket fences, Oscar Martinez was already up at 6 in the morning. At 38, Oscar embodied the American middle-class dream. A foreman at Lone Star Construction, he earned enough to support his family and pay the mortgage on his $350,000 home. His wife, Naomi, worked as an agent for State Farm Insurance, and their children, 12-year-old Marcos and 9-year-old Sophia, attended St. Hart's, a local Christian school. "Dad, don't forget about my soccer game on Saturday," Marcos called out, grabbing his backpack and a peanut butter sandwich. "Of course I won't forget, champ," Oscar replied, adjusting his tie in front of the mirror in the hallway. His reflection showed a man of medium height with a strong build, which he maintained through physical work. His short, dark hair was beginning to turn gray at the temples, which gave him a dignified appearance. Naomi came down the stairs, already dressed for work in a strict dark blue suit. At 35, she had retained the attractiveness that had once captivated Oscar in college. Their marriage had lasted 15 years, and to outsiders, they looked like the perfect couple. "I have a meeting with new clients today until 8 o'clock, she said, kissing her husband on the cheek. "Can you pick up the kids from school?" "No problem." The construction on Oak Street will be finished earlier than usual. After the family left to go about their business, Oscar was left alone in the quiet of the spacious house. He poured himself another cup of coffee and looked out the window at the house next door, where Mrs. Johnson was watering her roses. Everything looked peaceful and predictable, just the kind of life he had always wanted. But behind this idyllic picture lay a truth that no one in Kearney knew. At work, Oscar was known as a fair and demanding boss. His team of 8 respected him for his professionalism and ability to solve complex technical issues. Lone Star Construction specialized in residential and commercial buildings, and Oscar's reputation helped the company win lucrative contracts. "Martinez, we have a problem with the foundation on Cherry Lane," said Tommy Wilson, a young engineer. "The contractor says the soil is not what is specified in the project." Oscar carefully studied the drawings and estimates. His ability to find solutions quickly saved the company thousands of dollars every month. But even in the midst of work issues, his thoughts would wander from time to time. During his lunch break, instead of going with his colleagues to their usual Mexican cafe, Oscar would get into his Ford F-150 pickup truck and drive to another part of town. There, in an area locals called the other side of the railroad, was a small diner called Rosie's Diner. The place had seen better days. The red seat upholstery was cracked, and the chrome trim was tarnished. But the food was tasty and inexpensive, which attracted truck drivers and workers from local factories. Behind the counter worked a woman who would radically change Oscar's life, although he couldn't admit it even to himself. Elena Santos had been a waitress for 3 years. At 29, she possessed a natural grace and beauty that set her apart from the other women who worked there. She usually wore her long brown hair in a ponytail, and her smile could melt the ice even of the most sullen customers. But what attracted Oscar to her most was her ability to see him not only as a family man and successful builder, but as a person with a complex inner world. They met by chance 8 months ago when Oscar stopped by the diner for a quick bite to eat. Elena served him coffee and a bacon sandwich, and they struck up a casual conversation. She told him about her plans to enroll in accounting courses at a community college, and he shared his dreams of starting his own construction company. What began as chance encounters during lunch gradually turned into something more. Oscar found excuses to linger at construction sites in that part of town. He began stopping by Rosie's Diner, not only at lunchtime, but also after work, when Elena finished her shift. Their relationship developed slowly and cautiously. First, there were long conversations over coffee, then walks in the park on the outskirts of town, where no one was likely to see them. Oscar told himself that it was just friendship, a way to distract himself from the routine of family life. But with each meeting, he realized he was deceiving himself. Elena was not just a beautiful woman. She possessed a wisdom that many people his age lacked. Her past was complicated. She had moved to Kearney from Houston after a difficult period in her life, which she preferred not to discuss in detail. All Oscar knew was that she had gone through a painful process of self-discovery and now simply wanted to live a quiet, honest life. "You know, Oscar, sometimes I think people are afraid to be themselves," she said once, as they sat on a park bench watching the sunset. "They create images that they think society expects of them, and then they play that role their whole lives." These words touched him deeply because he recognized his own life in them. Since childhood, Oscar had felt pressure to live up to certain expectations. His father, who worked as a foreman at an oil refinery, raised him with strict traditional values. "A real man provides for his family, protects his home, and goes to church on Sundays," he would repeat to his son. Oscar followed this plan his entire life. He married Naomi, who came from a good family and shared his views. He bought a house in a decent neighborhood, had children, regularly attended a Baptist church, and voted for conservative candidates in elections. But inside, he always felt uneasy, as if he were playing a role that didn't suit him. Meeting Elena changed everything. For the first time in many years, he felt he could be sincere. With her, he could discuss his doubts, fears, and dreams without fear of being judged. She didn't demand that he be the perfect husband or father. She accepted him for who he was. But their relationship carried serious risks. Kearney was a conservative town where rumors spread faster than wildfire. Most residents held traditional views on marriage and family. Pastor Michael Collins of First Baptist Church regularly preached about the importance of family values and the dangers of modern morality. Besides, Elena wasn't just any other woman. Oscar knew more about her past than he would have liked. He knew that she was a transgender woman who had undergone transition several years ago. This knowledge both frightened and attracted him. He had never considered himself a person with a non-traditional orientation, but his feelings for Elena were real and strong. Every Sunday at church, Oscar sat next to his wife and children, listened to sermons about sin and redemption, and felt like a hypocrite. Pastor Collins often spoke about the importance of honesty before God and family, but Oscar couldn't imagine what would happen if he told the truth about his feelings. "Daddy, why are you so pensive?" Sophia asked one evening as they did their math homework. "Just tired from work, Princess," he replied, trying to focus on the examples. But the truth was more complicated. Oscar lived in constant tension between two worlds. During the day, he was a model family man, building houses and planning family vacations. In the evenings, he dreamed of meeting Elena, of conversations that made him feel alive. Naomi seemed to suspect nothing. She was absorbed in her career and raising her children. Their marriage functioned like a well-oiled machine. Each played their role, and on the surface, everything looked perfect. But the sincerity and passion that Oscar found with Elena had long since disappeared from their relationship. The secret meetings continued for months. Oscar and Elena met in small cafes on the outskirts of the city, walked along deserted paths in the suburbs, and sometimes drove to neighboring towns where no one knew them. These moments were a breath of fresh air for Oscar in the suffocating atmosphere of his double life. But secrets have a way of requiring more and more lies to maintain them. Oscar began to make up excuses for his absences, telling Naomi about overtime work or meetings with clients. He bought gifts for his family to hide his guilt and tried to be a more attentive husband and father. However, the further their relationship with Elena progressed, the stronger his inner conflict became. He loved his family, but he couldn't give up his feelings for the woman who gave him what he didn't get at home: complete acceptance and understanding. Elena Santos woke up every morning in a small one-room apartment on the second floor of an old building on Church Street. The $700 rent took up most of her waitressing salary, but it was the only place she could afford in Kearney. The apartment was modest but cozy, Elena decorated it with potted plants and photographs that reminded her of how far she had come. On her bedside table was a photograph taken 2 years ago in Houston. In the picture, she was hugging her sister Maria after completing hormone therapy. At that moment, Elena finally felt that her appearance matched who she had always been inside. The path to this moment took years of struggle, rejection by her family, and painful loneliness. Elena was born Andres Santos to a deeply religious Catholic family in a small town near the Mexican border. From early childhood, she knew that something was wrong. While other boys played soccer and dreamed of careers as engineers or soldiers, Andres secretly tried on his mother's dresses and imagined himself as a girl. "It's just a phase. It will pass," his mother said when 7-year-old Andres asked for pigtails like his sisters. His father was less tolerant. "Stop acting like a sissy," he would yell when he caught his son playing inappropriate games. Adolescence became a nightmare for Elena. Her body was developing in a way that caused her physical pain. Every morning, when she looked in the mirror, she saw a stranger. At school, her classmates teased her about her feminine mannerisms and called her offensive names. Teachers either ignored the bullying or believed that Andres was to blame for what was happening. At 18, she ran away from home with $200 and a bus ticket to Houston. The first few years in the big city were about survival. Elena worked as a waitress in 24-hour diners, washed dishes in Chinese restaurants, and cleaned office buildings at night. She saved all the money she earned for transition procedures. The process was long and expensive. First, there were months of psychological therapy to obtain official permission for hormone treatment. Then there were years of taking estrogen and testosterone blockers, which gradually changed her body. Finally, there were the surgeries, which cost tens of thousands of dollars and required months of recovery. But the most painful thing was her family's rejection. When Elena wrote a letter to her parents explaining her transition, her father replied with just one line: "We no longer have a son." Her mother did not respond at all. Only her younger sister Maria kept in touch with her, and even then, she did so secretly from their parents. After completing her physical transition, Elena felt ready for a new life. Houston was a large and diverse city where she could blend in with the crowd, but she wanted peace and quiet. A friend told her about a job in Kearney, and she decided to try life in a small town. Moving to Kearney 3 years ago was a new chapter, but not without difficulties. In a conservative Texas town, transgender people were rare, and attitudes toward them were often hostile. Elena decided not to hide her identity completely, but not to advertise it either. She officially changed her documents and was considered a woman, but some people in the city knew or suspected her past. Rosie's diner owner, Rosa Gutierrez, was one of the few who accepted Elena without judgment. The elderly Mexican woman knew what discrimination was and saw Elena as a hardworking and honest person. "I don't care who you were before," Rosa said on her first day at work. "What matters is who you are now and how you feel about your job." Elena became one of the best waitresses in the restaurant. She was attentive to customers, quickly memorized orders, and always smiled, even when she felt tired or depressed. But behind that smile lay loneliness. Her personal life in Kearney was difficult. Most men in town did not consider transgender women as potential partners. Elena tried to meet people online and went on dates in neighboring towns, but the relationships did not work out. Either the men did not know about her past and reacted with shock when she told them the truth, or they were only interested in her as an exotic novelty. So, Oscar's appearance in her life was an unexpected gift. Unlike other customers at the diner, he talked to her as a person, not as a server. He was interested in her opinion, shared his thoughts, and gradually a genuine connection developed between them. When Oscar learned about her past, Elena expected rejection. Instead, he said, "That doesn't change who you are now." Those words meant more to her than he could imagine. For the first time in years, Elena felt truly accepted. With Oscar, she could discuss her fears and dreams without fear of judgment. But as their relationship developed, Elena began to feel frustrated. Their meetings took place in secret, as if their connection was something shameful. They couldn't go to the movies or a restaurant in the city center together, couldn't just walk down the streets holding hands. Every date felt like a secret operation with conspiracies and alibis. "Why do we have to hide?" she asked him one evening as they sat in his pickup truck in an empty parking lot outside of town. "Elena, you know my situation," Oscar replied, avoiding her gaze. "I have a family, a reputation. If people find out, so what? What will happen if people find out you're dating me? That you're happy?" He didn't answer, but his silence spoke louder than any words. Meanwhile, life in Kearney was becoming increasingly stressful for Elena. In recent months, she had noticed that some customers at the diner had become colder toward her. They whispered behind her back and gave her dirty looks. Several times she had overheard offensive comments that people made, thinking she couldn't hear them. Pastor Michael Collins of First Baptist Church had recently delivered a particularly harsh sermon on traditional family values and modern perversions. Although he did not name names, many in the community understood what he was talking about. "We must protect our children from those who want to destroy the foundations of our society," he proclaimed from the pulpit, and the congregation nodded in agreement. Elena did not attend church, but the pastor's words reached her through her diner customers. She felt the atmosphere of hostility thickening around her. One evening, as she was closing Rosie's diner, a group of teenagers approached her. They were drunk and aggressive. "Hey, freak!" one of them shouted. "You don't belong here!" Elena tried to walk calmly to her car, but they surrounded her. "We know who you really are," said another guy. "Maybe it's time you got out of our town?" Fortunately, a patrol officer appeared at that moment, and the teenagers scattered. But the incident left Elena fearful and confused. She told Oscar about it the next day. "That's not right," he said, squeezing her hand. "No one has the right to treat you like that." "Then help me," she asked. "Let's stop hiding. Let people know that there's something real between us." But Oscar backed away again. "It's not that simple, Elena. I have to think about the children, about work. Do you think about me? About how I feel, living as your dirty secret?" Their conversations on this subject became increasingly tense. Elena understood the complexity of Oscar's situation, but her own need for an honest, open relationship grew with each passing day. She was tired of living in the shadows, of feeling that she wasn't good enough to be with him in public. "I've been through too much to hide again," she told him during one of their meetings. "I've spent years becoming myself. I can't pretend I don't exist." Elena began to dream of a future in which they could be together openly. She imagined them moving to another city where no one knew them. Oscar could get a divorce and start a new life. She understood that it would be difficult for his children, but she believed that in time they would understand and accept her. But when she shared these thoughts with Oscar, he was frightened. "Elena, I can't just drop everything and leave. This is my family, my home, my job. And what am I to you? A fling?" "No, you know that's not true. But there are things I can't change." Gradually, tension grew between them. Elena felt that their relationship had reached a critical point. Either they had to move forward and build a future together, or they had to break up. But the thought of breaking up caused her unbearable pain. At the same time, pressure from the community was mounting. Elena noticed that some regular customers had stopped coming to Rosie's diner. Rosie tried to support her, but even she was beginning to worry about the impact on the business. "Maybe you should think about moving, honey," she said one day, her voice pained. "Not because I want you to leave, but because I'm afraid for you." Elena knew she was trapped. On the one hand, the growing hostility of society was making her life in Kearney increasingly unbearable. On the other hand, her relationship with Oscar kept her in town, but that relationship itself did not give her what she was looking for: complete acceptance and the opportunity to be herself openly. She knew she would soon have to make a decision. Either force Oscar to choose between her and his former life, or leave and start over somewhere else. But both options frightened her because she truly loved this man and did not want to lose him. October in Kearney was rainy and cold. Gray clouds had hung over the city for a week, creating a depressing atmosphere that mirrored Oscar Martinez's inner state. He sat in his pickup truck in the empty parking lot of an abandoned shopping center on the outskirts of town, waiting for Elena. Their meetings in recent weeks had become more infrequent and tense. When Elena pulled up in her used Honda Civic, Oscar immediately noticed the look of determination on her face. She got into his car without even saying hello. "We need to have a serious talk," she said, looking straight at him. "Elena, I know what you want to say, but no, Oscar. This time you're going to listen to me until I'm done." There was a steely determination in her voice that he hadn't heard before. Elena folded her arms on her lap and took a deep breath. "I'll be 30 in 3 months. I've spent the last 10 years of my life becoming myself. I've endured rejection from my family, ridicule, humiliation, the physical pain of surgery, years of loneliness. And you know what? I survived. I became who I wanted to be." Oscar was silent, feeling a lump of anxiety growing in his stomach. "But 8 months with you have shown me what it means to be loved," she continued. "For the first time in my life, I felt that someone accepted me completely, unconditionally, and I fell in love with you so deeply that it scares me." "Elena, let me finish. These 8 months have been the happiest of my life, but they've also been the most painful, because every time we meet in secret, every time you go home to your wife, every time we pretend to be strangers in public places, I feel like a dirty secret." The rain intensified, pounding on the roof of the car like a drum roll. "I can't live like this anymore, Oscar. I've come too far to go back into hiding, so I'm giving you an ultimatum." The word ultimatum sounded like a thunderclap. Oscar felt his heart beat faster. "You have until the end of the month to make a choice. Either you tell your wife the truth and start divorce proceedings, or we break up for good." "Elena, you don't understand." "I understand better than you think. You have children, a job, a reputation, but I have the right to an honest relationship, to not be someone's shame." Oscar closed his eyes, trying to collect his thoughts. In recent months, he had felt the pressure mounting on both sides. At home, Naomi had started asking questions about his frequent absences. At work, his colleagues joked that he had become distracted. At church, Pastor Collins was preaching more and more about the importance of family fidelity. "Give me time to think," he asked in a weak voice. "There's no time, Oscar. Halloween is 2 weeks away. That's enough time to make a decision." She opened the car door. "And one more thing. If you choose me, I want us to start planning to move to another state where no one knows us, where we can be a couple without looking back at the past." After she left, Oscar sat in the car for a long time, listening to the sound of the rain. Thoughts raced through his head like autumn leaves in the wind. He loved Elena. That was undeniable. With her, he felt alive, real, free from the pressure of social expectations. But the price of these feelings seemed exorbitantly high. At home, his familiar world awaited him. Naomi was cooking dinner. The children were doing their homework. Marcos was excited about the upcoming school football game, and Sophia was rehearsing her role as an angel for the Christmas play at church. "Dad looks tired," Sophia remarked as they sat down at the table. "Just a lot of work, princess," he replied, trying to smile. But Naomi looked at him searchingly. "Oscar, maybe we should take a vacation? Visit your parents in San Antonio for Thanksgiving?" The mention of his parents caused a new wave of anxiety. His father, a Vietnam War veteran, had raised him in strict traditions. His mother was a deeply religious woman for whom family was a sacred institution. What would they say if they found out about his relationship with a transgender woman? The next few days were spent in agonizing reflection. Oscar tried to imagine how he would tell his children about the divorce. How would he explain to Marcos and Sofia that their father had fallen in love with another woman? How would they react when their classmates started teasing them about their father abandoning his family for a pervert? He became even more distracted at work. He made a mistake in the calculations for a new project, which could have cost the company several $1,000s. Jim Harris, the owner of Lone Star Construction, called him into his office. "Oscar, what's going on with you? You've always been my most reliable foreman, and now you're making mistakes you never used to make." "I'm sorry, Mr. Harris. Just personal problems. It won't happen again." "I hope not. We have too many orders to allow ourselves to be careless." Jim Harris was a pillar of the local community, a deacon at the same church where Oscar took his family on Sundays. If the truth came out, Oscar would not only lose his job, but also become an outcast in the town where he had lived his entire life. Meanwhile, Elena's situation in town continued to deteriorate. Rumors reached Oscar that a group of local activists led by Pastor Collins was planning to petition the city council to protect traditional values. Although officially it was about countering inappropriate influence in general, everyone understood that Elena was the target. On Sunday, a week before Elena's ultimatum expired, Pastor Collins delivered a particularly harsh sermon. "Brothers and sisters, our community is facing an attack on our sacred values," he thundered from the pulpit. "There are those who want to impose their perverted ideology on us to force us to accept what is contrary to the Word of God." Oscar sat in the fourth row between his wife and children, feeling the pastor's every word pierce him like a knife. "We must protect our children, our families from this evil. Sometimes love requires us to be firm, to say no to what seems modern and progressive, but is in fact sin." After the service, several parishioners approached Oscar. "Oscar, you know that person who works at the diner on Church Street, don't you?" asked Mrs. Wilson, the wife of a local banker. "They say she used to be a man." Oscar felt the ground slip away from under his feet. "I don't know her very well. I sometimes stop by for lunch during work." "Just be careful," Deacon Harris interjected. "People like that can be unpredictable. It's best to stay away from them." That evening, Oscar met Elena at their usual place. She immediately noticed his depressed state. "What's wrong?" He told her about the pastor's sermon and his conversation with the parishioners. "See?" Elena said bitterly. "That's exactly what I was talking about. As long as we hide, they feel entitled to say whatever they want about me. And you stand by and say nothing. What could I do? Stand up and announce our relationship to the whole church? Why not? At least it would be honest. Elena, you don't understand the consequences. If the truth comes out, I'll lose everything. My job, my home, my children. Naomi will take them and move to her parents' house in Dallas. I'll only see Marcos and Sofia on weekends, if at all. What will I lose if we continue to hide? I'm already losing my job. Fewer and fewer clients want to be served by a transgender woman. Rosa is starting to hint that maybe I should look for another place. Yesterday, someone scratched the word pervert on my car. They looked at each other across a chasm of mutual misunderstanding. You have 3 days left, Oscar, Elena said quietly. Halloween is on Thursday. I want your answer by Friday. On Monday and Tuesday, Oscar hardly slept. He lay next to Naomi, listening to her steady breathing, and tried to imagine how he would destroy her world. She didn't deserve such betrayal. The children didn't deserve to have their father destroy their family for a relationship that most people in their town considered unacceptable. On Wednesday evening, he made his decision. Or rather, the decision made itself. He couldn't leave his family. No matter how strong his feelings for Elena were, the price was too high. He called her on Wednesday evening. I can't, Elena. I'm sorry, but I can't ruin my children's lives. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long that he wondered if she had hung up. I understand, she finally said, in a voice devoid of emotion. Then we won't see each other anymore. Elena, wait. But she had already hung up. Thursday, October 31st, Halloween was sunny and warm. The children were excited about the upcoming candy collection, and Naomi decorated the house with pumpkins and fake spider webs. Oscar tried to participate in the family preparations, but his thoughts kept returning to Elena. He didn't know that on that same Thursday morning, Elena had made her own decision. If Oscar didn't want to be open with her, she would force him to make a choice right now, in front of his family. Let him explain to his wife and children who she was and what had happened between them. On Thursday evening, while the Martinez family was handing out candy to children in costumes, Elena Santos got into her Honda and drove to Maple Street. She knew the address. She had seen Oscar turn into the neighborhood several times when they ran into each other in town. She didn't have a clear plan, only a desperate desire to force the man she loved to finally make an honest choice. October 31st, 8:15 p.m., 412 Maple Street. The Martinez family celebrated Halloween in the traditional way. 12-year-old Marcos dressed up in a superhero costume, 9-year-old Sophia dressed up as a princess in a pink dress with sequins, and Naomi, dressed as a witch in a playful costume, handed out candy to the children who rang the doorbell. Oscar helped her, trying to look like a cheerful father, although inside he was tormented by thoughts of yesterday's conversation with Elena. The rain that had been drizzling since morning finally stopped, and the streets were filled with children in costumes. Laughter and shouts came from all sides, creating an atmosphere of festive fun. Pumpkin garlands decorated the porches of houses, and artificial spider webs fluttered in the wind. "Dad, can I go to Jacob's house? His mom said they have a game console with a new game," Marcos asked, clutching a bag of collected candy. "Sure, son. Just be home by 10. Sophia sat down on the living room sofa with her coloring book, glancing periodically at the door in anticipation of new visitors. Naomi was cleaning up the remains of the holiday decorations in the kitchen. At 8:23 p.m., a battered Honda Civic pulled up to the house. Elena Santos got out of the car, paused for a moment at the gate, took a deep breath, and walked decisively toward the front door. She was wearing a simple black jacket and jeans, her hair loose around her shoulders. She had no costumes or candy in her hands, only her car keys and phone. The doorbell rang louder than usual. Oscar, who was in the living room, felt his heart skip a beat. Something about the ringing seemed familiar and alarming at the same time. "I'll get it," he called to Naomi as he headed for the door. When he opened the door and saw Elena on the porch, time seemed to stand still. Her face was pale but determined. Her eyes burned with a desperate gleam. "Elena, what are you doing here?" he whispered, instinctively blocking the doorway. "I need to talk to you, and your family," she said loudly enough for her voice to carry into the living room. "Who's there, dear?" Naomi asked from the kitchen. Sophia looked up from her coloring book, glancing curiously toward the front door. "It's work," Oscar tried to lie, but Elena took a step forward. "No, it's not work. My name is Elena Santos, and I have something to say about your relationship with my husband." "Your husband?" Naomi appeared in the hallway, drying her hands with a kitchen towel. Her face showed confusion. "Elena, don't do this," Oscar pleaded, but she ignored his request. "Mrs. Martinez, your husband has been seeing me for 8 months. We love each other, and I came to find out if he's finally ready to be honest with you." The words hung in the air like explosives with a lit fuse. Naomi turned pale, the towel falling from her hands. "What is she saying, Oscar?" Sophia got up from the sofa, sensing the tension between the adults, but not understanding the reason for it. "Mommy, who is that lady?" Oscar's gaze darted between his wife and Elena, feeling his world crumble. Adrenaline filled his blood, and his temples throbbed. "Elena, leave. Immediately. You had no right to come here." "I have a right to know where I stand. Your wife has a right to know the truth," she replied, not backing down. "Oscar, explain to me what's going on." Naomi's voice trembled. At that moment, Sophia came closer, and Elena saw a 9-year-old girl in a princess costume. Something fluttered in her face. "Hi, sweetie. You're a very beautiful princess." "Don't talk to my child," Oscar exploded. It all happened very quickly. Oscar grabbed Elena by the arm, trying to push her out onto the street. She resisted, trying to explain the situation to Naomi. Sophia cried out in fear. Naomi screamed, demanding an explanation. In the chaos of the struggle, Oscar pushed Elena too hard. She lost her balance, fell backward, and hit her head on the concrete step of the porch. The sound of the blow was dull and final. Silence. Elena lay motionless, her eyes open and staring at the dark sky. A thin trickle of blood flowed from under her head. "My God," Naomi whispered. Sophia screamed. Oscar knelt beside the body, checking her pulse with trembling hands. Nothing. Elena Santos was dead. 8:47 p.m. emergency services arrive. Detective Rebecca Torres received the call as she was finishing her shift at the Harris County Police Station. At 42, she was one of the most experienced investigators in the homicide division. Small in stature, with short graying hair and piercing brown eyes, she had a knack for seeing what others missed. "Torres, we have a body on Maple Street. Female, 29 years old. Suspicious death," reported the sergeant on duty. When she arrived at the scene, the area was already cordoned off with yellow tape. Ambulances, police cars, and a medical examiner's van filled the quiet street. Curious neighbors gathered behind the tape, whispering to each other. The body lay on the steps of 412. A young woman in a black jacket and jeans, her long brown hair scattered across the concrete. The pool of blood beneath her head was already beginning to darken. "What do we have?" Torres asked Officer Michael Davis, the first to arrive on the scene. "Elena Santos, 29 years old, waitress at Rosie's Diner. The owners of the house are the Martinez family. Oscar Martinez claims that the woman came uninvited, an argument ensued, and she accidentally fell and hit her head." Witnesses? The suspect's wife, Naomi Martinez, and their 9-year-old daughter, Sophia. Their 12-year-old son was at a friend's house at the time. Torres examined the scene. The drops of blood on the steps looked natural for this kind of injury. No obvious signs of a struggle, but something about the position of the body bothered her. "Where is the family now?" "In the house. Martinez is giving a statement to Sergeant Wilson. His wife and daughter are in shock." Torres entered the house. In the living room, she saw a middle-aged man sitting on the sofa with his head down. Oscar Martinez looked depressed, but was in control of himself. His wife was sitting in an armchair, holding a crying girl on her lap. "Mr. Martinez, I'm Detective Torres. I need to ask you a few questions." Oscar raised his head. His eyes were red, but they showed alertness. "I already told Officer Wilson everything. It was a tragic accident." "I understand, but I need to hear the story from you personally. How did you know Miss Santos?" A short pause. Too long for a chance acquaintance. "She worked at a diner where I sometimes had lunch. We were acquaintances." "Just acquaintances?" Oscar's gaze darted to his wife, then back to the detective. "Yes, just acquaintances." Torres noticed that look. In her practice, she had seen thousands of people who lied about their relationships with victims. "And she came to your house at 8 p.m. on Halloween just to talk?" "She was unstable. She was saying strange things about how we were supposedly close. I tried to explain to her that she was mistaken." Naomi sniffed. She said Oscar had been seeing her for 8 months." "That's not true," Oscar quickly interjected. "She was mentally ill. Maybe she was on drugs." Torres wrote this down in her notebook. The lies were piling up like a snowball. "Mr. Martinez, describe exactly what happened on the porch." "She started telling my wife and daughter lies about our relationship. I tried to get her to leave. She resisted. We struggled a little, and she accidentally fell backward." "Did you push her?" "I tried to get her out of the house." "Yes, maybe I pushed her a little, but not with malicious intent." Torres studied his face. Classic signs of a person telling a partial truth, hiding important details. "Mrs. Martinez, can you confirm your husband's version?" Naomi looked at Oscar with confused eyes. "It all happened so fast. That woman was saying strange things. Oscar tried to get her to leave, then she fell." Did she fall on her own or did her husband push her? I don't know. Maybe he pushed her a little, but she was aggressive herself. The detective went outside, where medical examiner Dr. Patel was examining the body. What can you tell us preliminarily? Blunt trauma to the back of the head. Death was instantaneous from massive bleeding in the brain, consistent with a fall onto a concrete surface. Could she have sustained such an injury just by falling? Possibly. But the force of the impact was significant. Either she fell from a great height, or she was pushed quite hard. Torres returned to questioning the neighbors. Mrs. Johnson, from the house across the street, saw the woman drive up and enter the Martinez's house. She looked determined, not like a casual visitor. She walked straight to the door as if she knew where she was going. Mr. Thompson from the neighboring house heard raised voices but couldn't make out the words. At first they were talking normally, then they started shouting. A woman's voice, a man's voice, then a child crying. By midnight, Torres had a general picture of the events, but many questions remained unanswered. Why did Elena Santos come to the Martinez house on Halloween? What was the true nature of their relationship? And why was Oscar so nervous if it really was an accident? She decided to check Elena's phone records. Her cell phone showed numerous calls to a number registered to Oscar Martinez. The last call was the night before. Interesting, she muttered as she studied the call list. At 1:30 a.m., she released the Martinez family on their own recognizance, but warned Oscar that the investigation would continue. Mr. Martinez, I strongly urge you to be honest with me. Lying during a murder investigation can have serious consequences. I'm telling the truth, detective. It was a tragic accident. But Torres saw fear in his eyes. And not just fear for what had happened, but fear of what might be revealed. Back at the station, she began compiling a list of questions for further investigation. The first thing she needed to find out was the true nature of the relationship between Oscar Martinez and Elena Santos. Second, were there any witnesses to their meetings? Third, what exactly happened on the porch of the house on that fateful evening? Her intuition, honed by years of work, told her that this was no simple accident. Behind Elena Santos's death lay secrets that someone was desperate to keep hidden. At 3 o'clock in the morning, Detective Torres finally went home, but sleep eluded her. Fragments of the evening spun around in her head. Oscar's frightened face, his wife's confusion, the baby's crying, and in the middle of it all, the body of a young woman on the cold steps. Tomorrow we'll start digging deeper, she promised herself as she fell asleep in the early hours of the morning. November 1st, 9 a.m., Harris County Police Station. Detective Rebecca Torres began a new day of investigation by studying phone records. Over the past 8 months, Oscar Martinez and Elena Santos had exchanged more than 200 calls and text messages. For mere acquaintances, as Oscar claimed, this was suspiciously high. The messages that the technicians managed to recover told a completely different story. I miss you. When will we see each other? From Elena, October 15th. I can't stop thinking about last night. From Oscar, October 22nd. I love you, but this is becoming unbearable. From Elena, October 29th. The last message was sent on the day of his death. If you can't be honest, I'll be honest for both of us. Torres put down her phone and headed to Rosie's diner. She needed to talk to the owner and Elena's co-workers. Rosa Gutierrez greeted the detective warily. The elderly Mexican woman wiped her hands on her apron and avoided direct eye contact. Elena was a good girl, she began in broken English. Hardworking, honest, she didn't deserve this end. Mrs. Gutierrez, were any of the customers particularly close to Elena? Rosa looked around nervously. The diner was almost empty in the morning, with only a couple of truck drivers at a corner table. There was one man. He came almost every day for the last few months. He always sat at her table. Can you describe him? Average height, strong build. He drives a big pickup truck. Elena talked to him in a special way, like a woman talks to a man she likes. Do you know his name? No, but the other girls said they saw them together in the park on the outskirts of town. They were holding hands. Torres wrote this down in her notebook. The testimony was becoming increasingly compromising for Oscar. The next stop was the Lone Star Construction Office. Jim Harris, the owner of the company, looked concerned. "Detective, this is a terrible story. Oscar is one of my best employees. I can't believe he's involved in something like this." "Mr. Harris, have you noticed any changes in Mr. Martinez's behavior in recent months?" "Now that you ask, yes. He became distracted and was often late after lunch breaks. He made several mistakes in his calculations, which had never happened before." "Did he explain why?" "He talked about family problems. I didn't interfere in my employees' personal lives." At 2 p.m., Torres received the results of the fingerprint analysis. Elena's fingerprints were found in Oscar's pickup truck on the passenger seat and dashboard. This completely refuted his claims that they were not in a close relationship. It was time for a second interrogation. 3:30 p.m., interrogation room, police station. Oscar Martinez sat at a metal table, nervously fidgeting with his hands. Next to him was his appointed attorney, Robert Clark. Torres placed a folder with evidence in front of him. "Mr. Martinez, yesterday you claimed that you barely knew Miss Santos. Would you like to reconsider your testimony?" "I don't understand what you're talking about." Torres opened the folder and took out printouts of phone calls. 213 calls in 8 months. That's an average of 1 call per day. Is that normal for people who barely knew each other? The lawyer leaned over to his client and whispered something in his ear. "We talked sometimes. She needed support." "Support for what?" "She had problems. With work, with being accepted in the community. I tried to help as a Christian." Torres took out the fingerprint photos. "Miss Santos's fingerprints in your car, on the passenger seat. Explain that." Oscar turned pale. "I may have given her a ride a couple of times, when her car was being repaired." "Mr. Martinez, I have witnesses who saw you together in the park, holding hands. I have text messages in which you confess your feelings for each other. I have records that you met regularly for 8 months. Stop lying." Oscar covered his face with his hands. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it was." A long silence. The lawyer put his hand on his client's shoulder. "We were close," Oscar finally said, barely audibly. "But that has nothing to do with her death. Tell me about your relationship." "We dated. We talked. I had feelings for her." "Romantic feelings?" "Yes." "Did your wife know about it?" No one knew." "Why did you hide the relationship?" Oscar looked at the detective with despair in his eyes. "Do you understand who she was? What kind of city do we live in? If people found out I was dating a transgender woman, my life would be ruined. My job, my family, my reputation, everything would be gone. And that's why you kept her a secret for 8 months?" "I didn't want to hurt her, but I couldn't lose everything I had." Torres leaned forward. "What happened on October 30th when she last called you?" "She gave me an ultimatum. She said that by Halloween I had to choose between her and my family. Tell my wife the truth, or we would break up." "And what did you say?" "That I couldn't ruin my children's lives, that we had to break up." "And the next day she came to your house?" "Yes. She wanted to force me to make a choice right there, in front of my wife and daughter." "And you got angry." "I was scared. My 9-year-old daughter was there. Elena started telling my wife about our relationship. I couldn't let that happen." "So you pushed her?" Oscar began to cry. "I didn't want to kill her. I swear to God, I just wanted her to leave. She was threatening to destroy my family." "Threatened or just wanted honesty?" "To me, it was the same thing." The lawyer asked for a recess, but Torres continued. "Mr. Martinez, tell me exactly what happened on the porch." "Elena was telling my wife about our meetings. Sophia was crying. Naomi was screaming. I grabbed Elena by the arm and tried to pull her out of the house. She resisted, saying she wouldn't leave until she told the whole truth. I pushed her hard. She fell backward and hit her head on the step. "Did you push her on purpose?" "I wanted her to leave. I was panicking, but I didn't want to kill her. I loved her." "If you loved her, why couldn't you be honest with her?" Oscar stared at the table, tears dripping onto the metal surface. "Because I'm a coward. Because I was more afraid of people's judgment than of losing the only woman who accepted me for who I am." November 2nd. Arrest and public reaction. Oscar Martinez was arrested on charges of involuntary manslaughter. News of his relationship with a transgender woman spread through Kearney like wildfire. Pastor Michael Collins called an emergency meeting of the congregation. "Brothers and sisters, we see where straying from God's commandments leads. When a person gives in to sinful temptations, it destroys not only their soul, but also the lives of innocent people." But not everyone in town shared this view. A group of local human rights activists organized a memorial for Elena Santos in the city park. People brought flowers and candles. Some held signs reading "Love is not a crime" and "Justice for Elena." Naomi Martinez filed for divorce the day after her husband's arrest. She took the children and moved in with her parents in Dallas. "I didn't know who I had been married to for 15 years, she told a local newspaper reporter, "but I know that my children should not have to bear the burden of his choices." Rosa Gutierrez closed Rosie's Diner for a week after Elena's death. When the restaurant reopened, a photo of a smiling young woman hung in the window with the inscription, "In memory of Elena Santos. She deserved love." May 15th, 2025. Harris County District Court. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Prosecutor Jessica Rodriguez presented the case as a tragedy caused by prejudice and cowardice. Oscar Martinez killed Elena Santos not because he didn't love her, but because he was ashamed of that love. He chose to destroy the woman who gave him happiness rather than risk public condemnation. Thus, the defense insisted that it was a tragic accident. "My client never intended to harm Miss Santos. He was in a state of extreme emotional distress when she threatened to destroy his family." The jury returned a verdict of guilty of second-degree manslaughter. Judge Margaret Hill sentenced Oscar Martinez to 12 years in prison. "Mr. Martinez, your actions took the life of a young woman who was only looking for love and acceptance," she said in her sentencing statement. "What you call protecting your family was in fact an act of selfishness and prejudice." August 2025. Detective Torres received a letter from Elena's sister, Maria, who had come from Houston for the funeral. "Detective, thank you for finding the truth about my sister's death. Elena fought her whole life for the right to be herself. It's a shame she found love with a man who wasn't brave enough to fight for her." Attached to the letter was a childhood photo of Elena, a little boy in a dress, smiling at the camera, unaware of the difficult path ahead of him. Torres placed the photo on her desk alongside other murder cases. Each one was a story of human weaknesses, fears, and tragic choices. The town of Kearney gradually returned to its normal life, but the story of Oscar and Elena became a warning about the price of secrets and shame. An editorial appeared in the local newspaper. In a maximum security prison in eastern Texas, Oscar Martinez spent his days reflecting on his choices. He wrote letters to his children, which their mother did not allow them to read. He thought about the woman who loved him unconditionally and paid for that love with her life.